Welcome to High Infidelity, the best cheating videos on YouTube. If you enjoy this content, remember to subscribe and turn on notifications. Now let's get into the video.
Easter throwaway husband. On Easter Sunday, I, 28 male, discovered proof that my wife, 27 female, was having an affair. I approached her the following day with incontrovertible proof. I left and haven't talked to her since, nor do I intend to. We're getting divorced. But as profoundly broken as I am, I feel like even that is a futile gesture. My wife and I enjoyed what I thought was the ideal marriage. We were close friends who appeared to help one another in a variety of ways. We grew up together and dated from our final 2 years of high school till college. We were each other's first experience in every way. We studied at the same university in separate professions and married 2 years later. We relocated to a large city near our hometown in order to be closer to our relatives. I obtained a job as an engineer with a good pay and benefits, and she found a position teaching at a high-profile private school that she enjoyed. We earned a lot of money together, therefore we spent a lot of time together. We took a trip. We ate out regularly, and every night seemed like a special occasion. Even in a group of friends, the two of us were always together. We were so ecstatic that they could have used one of our goofy love smiles as a sample photo in picture frames for sale. Our life had always been fantastic. We judged less than 4 times per week to be a dry period. In overall, we had a wonderful existence. At least, that's what I assumed. I believed we had a wonderful life together, but I've realized it was all a lie. We were hoping to start a family soon. This really caught me off guard. I can't stop sobbing. I had hoped to be a parent someday, but that is no longer an option. We were meant to assist at our church hide Easter eggs on the grounds for youngsters to locate later on Easter morning at the of dawn. We woke up and dressed without bathing before traveling to church together. Later that day, we groggily assisted in the hiding of apparent eggs for the little children and more mysterious eggs for the older ones. My wife snapped several photographs of us, as well as many members of the church, on her phone. Before driving home, we all had coffee and donuts while chatting. I drove to church, but I had my wife drive us home. When we returned, she said she was going back to bed for a few hours. Because my father was a Baylor alumnus, I wanted to preview the college basketball championship game the following night. We'd packed my wife's iPad, which I used like it was my own all the time. I didn't expect to see anything, and she didn't expect it to show me anything. I'm not particularly technologically skilled, so I'm still not sure what occurred. But when we walked inside the home, I was reading an essay. An indicator in the bottom right corner mentioned something about images, and then picture after picture came one on top of the other. I'm not sure whether my wife's phone was synchronizing with the iPad or with our Wi-Fi. I'm at a loss once again. I kept reading once I realized the photos were the ones my wife had just shot outside the church a few minutes earlier. Suddenly, a few photographs flashed past that seemed to include nudity, which was completely out of character for my wife. I attempted to return by tapping on the images, but it seemed as if the photographs weren't on the iPad at all. It just showed me each one for a fraction of a second. I opened the picture file on the iPad, but there was nothing slightly obscene on it that I could detect. I discovered none of the images from the chapel were on the iPad, despite the fact that I'd seen them speed past. My wife walked into the kitchen and fetched a bottle of water to take back to bed with her. As I watched her go up the stairs, I had the distinct impression that she was concealing something from me for the first time in our relationship's history. I went through every file on the iPad in the hopes of finding what I'd seen, but I understood I'd have to check my wife's phone to have some peace of mind. I went upstairs and saw her comfortably asleep in our bed. I took her phone off the charger and carried it into our bathroom. We'd never had a phone policy that was either open or closed. We just utilized one another's equipment at our leisure with nothing to conceal. So finding out her passcode had been changed almost stopped my heart. I tried it many times at various rates. It had, without a doubt, been altered. My eyes welled up with tears just thinking about my wife maybe keeping anything from me. It was a sign that there was something I didn't know that I really wanted to know. I returned to her bedroom and replaced her phone in the charger. Part of me wanted to pretend I was insane or that I had just imagined seeing something risque, but my mind was playing tricks on me. I had anticipated realizing that what I saw was not carnal and laughing over what I thought it was. But it was the passcode that grabbed me. I tried to be as normal as possible. She knew me better than anybody, therefore it was tough to keep all feelings bottled up while being deceptive. However, late that afternoon, when she was in the kitchen, I received a text alert. I came around the corner just in time to watch her type in a new code, so I knew I wasn't absolutely insane. I took her phone into the bathroom again later that night, after she'd gone to bed. I typed in the new code and accessed her picture album. To my amazement, I couldn't find anything even like a nudity picture. I even discovered the images she'd shot that morning at church. There was nothing obscene among them. I was going to exit the app when I decided to search for deleted photographs. To my amazement, I discovered 2 nude and half-nude images of my wife, as well as a naked photo of someone other than myself. I immediately texted all 3 photographs to my phone, then erased both the text and the photos. I put my wife's phone back in the holder, went downstairs to make less noise, and puked like I'd been given IPCAC. I'd never seen either of my wife's photos before. She didn't do anything like that, and I didn't want her to. I could always have her to myself as soon as the next chance arose, and I already knew how stunning she looked nude. We simply had the feeling that images like that may always come back to haunt individuals. We felt no need to share our closeness with the rest of the world since she and I were too connected as one. So I reasoned. I had no idea who the man in the image was. Even though I had no clue who he was or whether my wife knew him in any way, I was enraged when I saw it. After I finished puking, I collapsed on the floor and sobbed like a kid. I'd never sobbed so hard in my life, but I knew something was wrong because I could feel it. Before I had to get up to go to work, I slept for a few hours close to my wife. Every project I was working on was placed on wait as I looked into how to retrieve text messages from a phone. As it turned out, since the plan we had was in my name via my work, I had access to every text message and picture received. To cut a long tale short, I retrieved body texts, selfies, and yes, even photos and video together. Everything was there. I could claim I puked again, but it was dry heaving. I'd gotten rid of the final item that might make me vomit at 2 a.m. I walked down to my vehicle and sobbed so hard that my eyes bled. I couldn't believe the horror I was experiencing was genuine. But I realized right then that everything with my wife, my closest friend, was done, and that every dream I had had vanished. I roared primal anger cries. I was relieved she wasn't around at my epiphany. I had no idea what I was capable of, and I didn't want her to view me in that light. I couldn't figure out what to do, where to go, or who to contact. I was in shock, and the person I would have gone to in that situation was the guy who had ruined me. I stopped sobbing and simply sat there in a stupor, not knowing what to do, but knowing I didn't want to do anything. I knew that what had begun as an unproductive morning would undoubtedly lead to an unproductive day. I returned inside, visited with each team member on the firm project we were working on, and then departed. I didn't want to even look at my wife. Therefore, I wasn't going to her school to face her. I basically drove around in disbelief for hours. I transitioned from tears to wrath and back again. The evidence was overwhelming and incontrovertible. I considered sending all of the material I discovered to her and both of our families, then driving my vehicle over a cliff. I didn't want to live any longer, and I definitely didn't want to cope with the confrontation that would ruin our marriage for good. My wife normally arrived home from work a few hours before I did, so I parked down the street from her school to observe where she went after work. Based on what I'd discovered, I assumed she'd go to her lover's place for a quickie after work. But she left and walked straight home, ignorant to the fact that I was following her for the most of the trip. At work, I'd printed out pages and pages of material and images to show her what I knew. I expected to approach her and have her deny everything until I gave her evidence, which would lead to a lot of discussion and arguing. That was not something I want. I didn't want to see her again, speak to her, or be in her company again. Those photographs, in particular, put a stop to whatever feelings I had for her in an instant. In fact, in the span of a single day, I went from adoring her more than I imagined a person could love to despising her with every fiber of my being. It baffled me how she could do what she did to me. We were done the moment she cheated. I was merely the last one to receive the message. My thoughts were, I simply wanted to walk inside the home, collect my belongings, and go without seeing her or saying anything. She was seated on the sofa, texting, as I stepped through the front door. She might have texted her mother, sister, or anybody else, but I knew she wasn't messaging me. And the day I found out the odds were stacked against me. She was busy doing more things that may bring me more misery. She smiled and observed that I had arrived home early from work. I didn't say anything to her. I strolled down the hall and entered our bedroom. I took a bag from the closet and started preparing clothing for my work week in a hotel room. She walked into my bedroom, saw me packing, and asked if I needed to leave on a last-minute work trip. I paused what I was doing, gave her a disgusted look, and then resumed packing. She approached me, asking what was wrong, and put her hand on my back. I recoiled from her touch as though I'd been touched by a dead animal corpse infested with maggots. Before shoving her away, I turned and snarled at her to never touch me again. When she inquired as to what was wrong, I referred to her as a diseased who deserved to have a flaming hot poker shoved into her privates to prevent her from reproducing. She had the arrogance to seem surprised and wounded. That's when I took out the stack of documents I'd copied, dumped them on the bed, closed my bag, and started walking away. She took a seat to read the newspaper. I heard her scream, "No," before breaking down in tears and racing to grab me before I got down the corridor. I made it out the door and into my vehicle, tossing my luggage in the back. She made it outside before I pulled over. As I drove away, I raised my middle finger to her. My phone began to ring like a casino slot machine, so I just switched it off. My objective was to totally ignore her and let my lawyer handle the legal aspects of the divorce. I didn't care how they met, why it happened, or what had transpired between them. She was fully aware that cheating was a deal breaker. I had no clue why she was phoning, but I didn't care. I booked into a hotel approximately a mile away from my employment. I went to a nearby restaurant and ate some meal I didn't want to consume. Back in my room, I utilized the hotel phone to contact my mother and inform her of my whereabouts. She'd been concerned since she was one of the first people my wife had contacted after I'd gone. When I asked my mother whether she'd been informed why I'd gone, she said she hadn't. I informed her what I discovered, that we were divorcing, and that I'd be searching for work in another state so I wouldn't have to see my SDBXW or any of her relatives again. I requested her to keep what she knew to herself, my father, and my siblings. My mother sobbed. I wasn't there to see it, but it sounded like ugly sobbing and shock to me. However, the idea that my wife and her family were no longer a part of our lives was upsetting. Knowing she'd never hold a grandchild fathered by me had to have hurt a lot too. But since she understood how I was reared, she knew I was done. Stay tuned for the next part.